Hey y'all, I'm Shauna. Welcome in or welcome back to the channel. Today I have a very fun video to end reaction week. And I've been so excited to make this video because I feel like we just need a little bit more positivity around here. Making reaction videos to overconsumption is fun, and I know you guys like it as well. And, we can be more critical of our purchases, but I also think it's nice to kind of balance some of that with stuff that I do like. And we are going to be talking about the underconsumption or underconsumption core trend that's been going around TikTok. If you haven't seen any of these kinds of TikToks before, I'm going to have one going on the screen now. Actually, I'll move over just a smidge so we can have our TikTok right up in here. And I'll show you some examples on the screen. Most of them have no talking and it's just text on the screen, and they're using one or two trending audios. In these TikToks, creators show themselves under consuming, which means a lot of different things. And we're going to discuss all of this as we go through some TikToks. So under consuming kind of tends to mean only owning one of something as it applies, using something far past its prime, mending stuff, buying stuff secondhand, and kind of similar things. So it is minimalism adjacent, but it is kind of its own thing too. So we're going to talk about some of the themes of these TikToks and what I like as we go through. And then at the end, we are going to talk a bit about critiques of these kinds of TikToks because, nothing is perfect. And while this TikTok trend isn't perfect, I am super happy to see more of this kind of content in my feed and online. So let's get to our first TikTok. And this one has 2.5 million views. Let's watch. This one I think might be one of my favorite ones. And one of the things I appreciate about this TikTok, and I think what we might see as we go through, is this mentioning or focusing on aesthetics. A lot of underconsumption creators do talk about non-aesthetic things. And I also see people in the comments talking about how these types of videos have really shown them how much aesthetics have played into their desire for stuff and why they want to buy new things. Sometimes it's like the product itself being aesthetic or the way it's showcased being aesthetic. Other times it's people feeling insecure about their stuff, or like, oh, my living room isn't aesthetic. I would like new art or lamps or things like that. And so in her video, we see mismatched bedroom furniture. We see mismatched mugs and towels too. And I personally so appreciate that because I kind of feel like that's just what a lot of people's homes look like, like the random assortment of mugs that they've kept over the years. Or when it comes to linens, I know like my parents' linen closet or people's, like mostly family, like you don't typically go scrounging through random people's linen closets, but I find so many people's linen closets are just this like random compilation of towels that they've acquired over the past 20 years. Mine look like that. I have these red towels that were initially my parents', and I have them now. They just kind of hang around for specific purposes, not so much for showering. I don't know how old they are. Like they're fraying at the edges. They are like, I grew up with them in my childhood. So they're well over 20 years old. and they're still going strong. And I so appreciate seeing people use stuff and just like let it be, like there's still more functionality left in your towels and left in your mugs. And when we see so much influencer culture in our feed, it can really position something being unaesthetic as that losing its purpose. When it's like, no, your random mug that has, I don't know, it's been worn off or chipped, that's like, it's still functional. You don't necessarily need to get something new because something doesn't look as cute as it used to. And when we are so used to seeing influencer very curated lives on social media, we can really, really feel like that is real life if that's all we're seeing. And I know that many of us, like, we go into other people's homes and we can see that, yeah, not everybody's house looks like what they see on the screen. But I think for a lot of folks, I would say this applies to me. Let me know in the comments. But I don't go to people's houses all that much. And if I do, it's like a couple of people's houses. And I think I see people's homes online far more than I see people's homes in real life. So we could very well be seeing a lot of random strangers' homes on the internet and having that very curated, very vibey and aesthetic. And it can really warp our sense of reality and what is normal. I really feel like this is just such a wake-up call to some of the homes and lives that we're seeing online in the best way. Because also sometimes like my makeup in specific can get super grubby and I'm like, I will see other people's makeup looking like that. And then when you see other people's makeup that's looking kind of grubby and messy and you're like, yeah, okay, this is really normal. Another kind of interesting point about these videos are the repetition of water bottles. We see a lot of people showcasing their water bottles and also people kind of flaunting maybe or showcasing that they haven't participated in trends because they don't own a Stanley. I think this is actually a bit of an interesting discussion maybe that I would like to have in the comments. I think trends can be a problem when there are so many of them and we are buying things simply because they're trends. And then, we can overaccumulate, especially if we're just not thinking very critically about them. But buying a trend isn't inherently overconsumption, right? Like if you need a new water bottle and you have one and you go and you buy a new one and the choice you make is the Stanley and that works for you, I don't feel like that's a problem. But also I feel like what I've heard are people kind of saying that something like the Stanley is such a recognizable brand that people can associate you with the trend. Or like if you're out in the wild, or let's say I had a Stanley and you saw it in my videos, like I drink coffee all the time in my videos. What if I had a Stanley and I was constantly showcasing it? And even if it was just one, I'm still contributing to the trend. And so I think the more we see something, the more trendy we can perceive it to be, and the more internal pressure we can feel on ourselves to buy the thing. And so with this, I can see it both ways. I would like to know how you feel about trends. I guess my personal opinion is that whether or not you buy a Stanley or not, or I guess I should say the type of water bottle you buy is not representative of overconsumption or underconsumption if you're buying one. Let's move on. And we are now going to watch this video that has 3.2 million views, and it's called Normal Consumption Core. One of the most interesting conversations I think that is happening as a result of this trend is the conversation of what is normal consumption. Because a lot of what I think we're seeing being labeled as underconsumption is normal consumption. Like I've read a lot of comments about this, and a lot of people are saying that overconsumption has become so normalized. Many people view that as normal, or many people's own consumption habits have become overconsumption, that like our sense of what is normal has been so warped that we're viewing normal levels of consumption as underconsumption. I'm really happy that we're having this conversation at all, and that it's happening in such a public space, because I really think that there are so many people who have been overconsuming and just haven't really been thinking about their consumption patterns. And usually it's something, maybe not usually, but in many cases, is there something that smacks you in the face that makes you question things? You know, I've had a couple of those moments myself, things that I've seen online or my own behavior that has smacked me in the face. And I'm like, what? This isn't normal, or something's not right about this. And I think that this trend for some people could be the smack in the face, in a good way, I hope. And I think that people are reckoning a little bit with what it means to consume, what it means to consume in normal patterns, and where theirs falls into that. People are now, like, I'm seeing people in the comments coming to realizations that they are viewing collecting, as an example, as normal, or buying and decluttering makeup really regularly as normal, or hauling makeup regularly as normal, or having hauls of clothes as normal. Buying, I mentioned this many times on the channel, I love this stat, that the average American consumer buys close to 70 new garments per year. That is normal, but that, in my opinion, is overconsumption. There are, of course, maybe like examples or situations where somebody may indeed need to buy a lot of clothes that year, but that would probably be not the norm. So if you are somebody who views overconsumption as normal, then I think what you are seeing in these videos is underconsumption. My own personal opinion is that some of this is underconsumption and some of it is normal, but I think how that applies would depend on the context. So let's take this TikTok as an example. She has one nail polish and she has a very, very small makeup collection, or she's a makeup bag. Okay, we have a mascara, a blush, a like tinted moisturizer, and a concealer, and a brow product. We don't have powder, we don't have bronzer, we don't have a lip product. There's a lot of things in here that could be missing in some people's routine, even if they were just going to own one thing. So for many people, myself included, this would be underconsumption based on if I were to do a full face of makeup and if I were to just have one product per category. And I'm saying, like, I'm only allowed one blush, I'm only allowed a singular lip product. This would be underconsumption because I wouldn't have the type of product I would need to compile a full face. However, if you don't wear a lot of makeup, or if you don't like makeup, this is a normal level of consumption. And then also with the nail polish, if you don't do your nails, or if you don't like doing your nails, one nail polish color is normal. This person has also positioned this video as normal levels of consumption for her, and she's reinforced that throughout her comments. So regardless of if this would be normal for me, this is normal for her. And I think that it's so healthy to see like somebody saying, yes, this is my normal level of consumption, and it look like this. And in the context of the makeup and the nail polish, I think it's very interesting to consider our love of stuff, because I think that many people justify over-consuming when they love something or when something is a hobby. As an example, I love wearing makeup, therefore I can own a lot of it. And I'm not saying that you're not allowed or we can't own more than the bare necessities for things in our life that we do love and we do enjoy and our hobbies. However, I think many of us are out of practice, or we don't think about setting boundaries with our stuff ownership or our money or budget for these kinds of categories. And so what I think can happen is this justification of either overspending or overbuying, even if you can afford it, when we love stuff. What I am suggesting is that our love of something can warp our sense of enoughness. Again, I don't want to say that like this arbitrary number is the cutoff for enoughness or for normal levels of consumption or overconsumption. But what I am saying, to be clearer, is do you think about enoughness and stuff ownership when it comes to different areas of your life? Because if we're always looking to the next thing, or our eyes are always on new, we can lose sight of what we have, and we can forget to or not appreciate what we already have and how amazing what we have is. If you don't consume like her, I think maybe like a takeaway could be considering what a collection of stuff, what a group of stuff in whatever category feels like enough to you. You know, what would be enough for you? I want to now put these two TikToks into a conversation together, because I think that they've taken slightly different approaches to this trend. So we're going to watch both of them together, and then we will talk about them together. All right, so both of these are very popular. Both have over 1 million views. And I think that they have taken different takes on the trend. So the very first one that we watched, to me, kind of, I feel like takes a more eco-sustainable lens on things and really focuses on using what she has, at least from what she's shown to us. So she's like made her own dry shampoo. She's using cutting up towels to repurpose them, and using her grandfather's canning jars as water vessels. And I do like this approach, and I like seeing people who have adapted these principles for their own life. Drinking out of jars is not my aesthetic, but I totally appreciate the mindset of using what you have. And I think if you're somebody who has been a very avid shopper, thinking about using what you have as the first step of things, which is probably like my biggest takeaway from what she is showing on her TikTok, even if you don't live a similar lifestyle to her, that is a habit or a mindset that needs to be cultivated, and one that we can be out of practice of if we're used to going to shopping to fulfill every need or want or desire. So getting used to using what you have first, or looking around for solutions to your problems without buying stuff, can be something that we need to develop practice in. And it's one that I like seeing role modeled and shown to me, to keep this mentality always at the front of my mind. And sometimes as well, this also means extending the life of your stuff. Cutting up the towels, really classic example, or cutting up shirts. I have a bunch that I hope to cut up this weekend. I was thinking my partner and I have been just cleaning up a lot more random spills and stuff, and just kind of going through towels pretty quickly. I have been using a little bit more paper towel than I would like. And I was like, dude, you have a whole bunch of t-shirts that you've put to cut up. Cut those bad boys up, we can do that. And I was reminded of that watching these TikToks. What I also really like about her TikTok and many of these underconsumption TikToks is the showcasing of all of their thrifted stuff. If you're already in the thrift TikTok or thrift YouTube or thriftogram. I don't know if that's what it's called, but it kind of sounds fun. You might already be used to thinking about secondhand options first or going there first. Or it can be incredibly normal seeing people shop on thrift websites or going to thrift stores. However, there's also a ton of people out there, if they're watching traditional influencers, can automatically, or their first thought is to go to Amazon or to go to the mall or whatever they like to shop, to go there first. And so firsthand shopping is sometimes the one and only solution. So a thought pops up in your mind, oh, I need more towels. So you click open Amazon, you search up towels, and then you add them to your cart. Maybe you check out in a couple of days. And that's like what normal shopping looks like. And I love all of this like normalizing secondhand shopping, because sometimes our mind doesn't go to, let me check secondhand first. And so I kind of feel like the more we see something, the more we're likely to maybe find that desirable or reproduce it for yourself. I talk all the time about how traditional influencers can influence us to live like them. The same can go for underconsumption TikTok. You have underconsumption TikTok on your feed. You might like know at the back of your mind, oh yeah, I would like to go to the thrift store or, check Marketplace or Kijiji or whatever for these items. But that might not be your first thought when you're watching, or if you're watching traditional influencers. So I just like this reinforcement of that being the normal first step, checking the thrift store first or checking Marketplace first. The second TikTok, in my opinion, is much more budget minded than the first TikTok. I mean, the second TikToker has Alex on a budget. So it obviously makes sense for her to really be budget conscious. And so when we look at her life and like the aesthetics of her life, she could be buying stuff secondhand. We don't really know, because that wasn't the focus of her TikTok. The focus of her TikTok was about all of this stuff, or I don't need to buy more stuff because what I have already works, and prioritizing, in my opinion, functionality over other features. And I think her aesthetic is much more minimalist leaning in terms of like design aesthetic, perhaps in philosophy or principle as well, but I don't know enough about her life to say whether that's true or not. And so the first TikToker, there is I feel like a thrift aesthetic, like vintagey kind of aesthetic. And I think that the first TikToker has this like kind of thrift eco style, and the second person has more of like a minimalist style. You can thrift both of these styles to be clear. And I like this dichotomy of styles. And I also like their emphasis on different things. And what these two show when we juxtapose them is how multiple styles and different considerations can be made and still kind of fit into underconsumption TikTok. I like this focus of functionality first, because I know I need that reminder myself. I don't necessarily want functionality to be like the number one focus everywhere in my life, but it should be a focus in most places. And I enjoy having that reminder. Yeah, so I think the second TikTok is much more about owning less and that kind of maybe more minimalist vibe. And this might just be more of your vibe or more of your aesthetic when coming across these TikToks. So this might be an account or a approach that appeals to you more than some of the others we've seen. I was also been thinking a lot about what's the difference between minimalism and underconsumption. And I think, in my opinion, underconsumption is a bit more multifaceted than minimalism. That underconsumption can be truly owning less and owning the least amount possible. But it can also be about the repurposing and the reusing and extending the lifespan of things. If you take the very first TikTok where the woman had a whole bunch of towels in her bathroom, I think minimalism might if minimalism and underconsumption were to have a conversation, I feel like minimalism might look at that and say, hey, do you really need all of these towels? Are all of these towels, like, are they adding functionality or purpose to them or to your life? Or are they taking up too much time and space and mental energy? I feel like underconsumption would probably answer back, well, what's going to happen when or if I were to declutter them? Where would they actually go? Are these at their end of life? Can they still hold a purpose? Do they still hold a purpose in my life right now? Like, are they still usable? If I got rid of these towels, would I then want to, or would getting rid of them prompt me to buy new towels? I think that underconsumption is much more concerned with product acquisition in terms of like where stuff is coming from, whereas I think minimalism are more concerned with product acquisition, would be more like the quantity of product acquisition than the where or the how of product acquisition. I think that there is room for different facets of underconsumption to coexist. And I think that there are minimalist principles or tendencies within underconsumption, but there are some differences as well. Hey, Editing Shauna here. I think if I had to give underconsumption maybe like a phrase or a motto or something, maybe a question that they might ask themselves if underconsumption was a person, might be something like, just because I could doesn't mean I should, right? Like, just because I could buy more makeup or I could buy new towels doesn't mean that I should buy them, or doesn't mean that I need to buy them. Underconsumption, I think maybe if there were like a one sentence definition or a hallmark, might just be buying less than you need. So when it comes to, as we've kind of talked about, like clothes and makeup, just because you might have the closet space to buy more stuff or the financial means to buy more stuff doesn't mean that you should buy new stuff. And I think that this is maybe an interesting question to ask yourself because, or at least this is a question I've been noodling over the past handful of days, because sometimes I'll look at, let's say, my makeup, because I'm kind of having a little bit of a makeup moment right now personally, and there's like cute new stuff, right? Or I could say like, oh, I finished these ColourPop eyeshadows, maybe I should replace them. Just because I have the money to replace them or I have the space to replace them doesn't actually mean that I should replace them, because quite frankly, I have other really amazing eyeshadows that I should be using. If I don't use them, they are going to go off. They are going to go bad. They are going to expire. And I've had a bunch of makeup recently expire, and it's been a bit of a sad moment. So I kind of, was trying to think through the lens of underconsumption. And I'm wondering, for you personally, like if you had to give underconsumption a motto, a quote, a phrase, a slogan, what would you give it? Let me know in the comments. I now want to get into a couple of more critical TikToks, or talking more critically about TikToks. And I want to show you a couple of people who have made satires on this trend. We're actually going to watch these two together. They're not very long. So this first person, I think that she is potentially satirizing two things. One is some of the minimalist flexing that is happening with these TikToks, people kind of showing how little that they're able to consume. And then number two, I think she's also potentially satirizing people who either don't fully understand what it means to underconsume, or have their own, or people who have misconstrued what like how they consume, viewing it as underconsumption when it might actually be overconsumption. I saw somebody who is hopping on this trend who very seriously showed like, these are my everyday shoes, or like wearing the same pair of shoes every day in front of like a collection of Jordans, or somebody saying like, this is my everyday water cup in front of, I would say maybe like 4 or 5 Starbucks cups. If we are talking about underconsumption, like 5 Starbucks cups isn't underconsumption. I don't even know if that would be normal consumption. Like I think that might be overconsumption. And so she is right that there are people who have a warped sense of consumption and then are coming on and saying, yes, my levels of consumption are under because they are less than what they're seeing online. And then also, I think potentially this could be some like minimalist flexing going on, or like making fun of that, because like the description of her video was about minimalism. I do think that like one of the problems with minimalism can be this like competition to see who can own the least amount possible. But because this trend is underconsumption and not necessarily minimalism, and I say that because minimalists can participate in underconsumption. We are seeing some of that, but it's still not minimalism. The second one I feel is a bit more like, let people consume how they want. Underconsumption is kind of stupid. And when you read some of the comments for some of these, satires, it's like, oh my God, these creators are so insufferable. Like, let people consume how they want. And I do understand if you're somebody who overconsumes, how this can maybe make you feel guilty about your levels of consumption. I get that. But I also feel like this trend on TikTok is doing a whole lot of good. And I don't like this rhetoric, almost period, about let people consume how they want. I've talked about this, I feel like, a lot on my channel over the past 2 months, that no, once you put yourself online and you put yourself in a public space, you are no longer privately consuming and you have influence on other people. So no, like you shouldn't just consume wildly. And we have so much evidence to show how influenced our own views of consumption, like how warped they've become with influencer culture. And this trend, when you're watching it, shows so many ways that people live that might be different from you, but also aren't influencer level consumption and Amazon hauls and just like aesthetics everywhere. You have people who are driving older cars or living in older homes and they haven't done renovations. That doesn't sound right. Renovations. They haven't done renovations to their homes. And people who are just making do and stretching what they have, which are really normal behavior. And I personally love seeing that. Now, if we are going to critique this trend, let me bring you a critique that I think is absolutely valid, is I think maybe one of the better critiques of underconsumption that is happening. And here is what I would consider to be a good critique, which we're going to talk about.
I love and hate the underconsumption core trend, and here's why. First of all, underconsumption is basically repackaged poverty lifestyles into sustainability. Now, I'm not saying that people who are promoting underconsumption are doing bad things. I think it's important that we show the general social media user that we cannot live an overconsumer society that is very materialistic and draining our ecological and our own resources of the ways that we see the planet and ourselves. Now, many people are saying, is underconsumption the same thing as zero waste, minimalism, sustainability, imperfect environmentalism? I'd say that as a sustainability creative myself, I do see the similarities. I don't really think that they're unique in some ways. I really feel that each of those specific words have failed to call out capitalism. And I think that's one of my biggest critiques, is that it's not really radicalizing people enough to extend themselves. I do think that it does raise awareness of like, yes, like we should be better consumers. We should repurpose our things. These are realistic things. But the systemic action is still lacking. And I feel that, to me, I'm looking back at the 2010s when the trash jars were so popular, is that it's not really gonna stick long term if it's not pushing people to think more radically. Americans spend $1.2 trillion annually on non-essential goods that we don't need. Now, for us, a lot of people are saying, well, what do you want us to do as consumers? Like, we're trying our best to use these eco-friendly products and to not use it and to repair. But to me, I also think that it's time for the modern American consumer to get back into demanding what's right, which is supporting labor unions. That is part of sustainability and the future. When you support labor unions, you're supporting people to get paid equitably, to be treated fair and dignity and respect. And 3, it showcases to other businesses that unions are a path forward towards economic justice and redistribution of wealth models. To me, de-influencing, minimalism, zero waste, low waste, and perfect environmentalism, these all share a common theme of their limitations of what it takes to create more change in our cultural society. And I really fear that if we don't move beyond the trends to unpack deeper levels of conversations or add more critical analysis and literacy of the ways that we talk about consumerism, I fear that we're going to just stop there at just saying, here's a hard drive, you can recycle it, and then that's it. And it's like, we don't want that. We want more systemic change now.
I agree with everything this TikToker is saying. And I think first and foremost that what is perhaps the most disheartening about underconsumption is that it's a trend, right? Like under-consuming is a trend for right now, and it's not going to have longevity. And so I think any critique of this trend as like it doesn't have legs and it's not radicalizing people is absolutely accurate. But I think those apply to every kind of social media trend because that was not their intended purpose. However, I think that any moment that a creator like this can jump in and be like, we need to be more radicalized is welcome, in my opinion. I think we constantly need those reminders because so often what is posed to us as solutions are things that are individualistic and turns problems onto consumers or onto the individual instead of into larger society. So things like minimalism, things like the zero waste movement are, or even if you think about it as well, like organic produce, these are things that don't fix the system. It has either provided people or, clean beauty, provided people with alternatives instead of fixing systems or fixing problems or educating people on how to fix problems. It's more about making things with individual action. With that said, we do need consumer awareness in order to affect change. And when it comes to consumption in specific, I think that there are there are environmental implications that affect, societies, but there are also personal financial components. So if you are somebody who has been overspending and overbuying and you've racked up credit card debt or you've remortgaged your home, the personal financial contributions or the personal financial changes that can come with changing how you shop, whether it's through minimalism or whether it's through underconsumption or budgeting or some kind of combination, the personal financial components can make a life-changing difference, as well as on your mental health and your overall well-being. And so, yes, there's some personal levels of things that do matter, but overall, if we want to have larger change, we do need to think about different redistribution of wealth models, like this guy has said. Both of our education systems are failing us is by educating young people on our wealth model and how it works. And as this TikToker was saying, consumer literacy as well. When we remain uneducated and in the dark about how our systems work, how capitalism works, as an example, or the environmental crisis, things just get to keep going as they are. And one of the things I consider a lot is about how privilege thrives when it's invisible and when we don't understand how systems of power work. So when we don't understand how where privilege lies, or how systems of power, how they are functioning in society, we can be disempowered to do something about them. And so I think that is part of the problem as well. I think there are political candidates in Canada and in the US who are really trying to do good things, and who are trying to do some of the things this TikToker has mentioned, or who are trying to do right by our environment or basic human rights. Let's start there. But to get these people into power is another thing. I've heard the trifecta of environmental change is consumer awareness, corporate responsibility, and workers' rights, and labor unions are a way to kind of get into the workers' rights camp. So that was kind of heavy in the end. Let's maybe watch one more for funsies, maybe. Okay, we're going to end on this one right here. We're just going to show you some more underconsumption core TikToks, because that was a bit heavy, and I just, I want to lighten it up a little bit before we leave. I really like watching these TikToks, and I think a lot of them they kind of hit on similar things, and it is kind of fun to see. We have water bottles mentioned a lot, makeup mentioned a lot, glasses, glassware mentioned sometimes, rags or towels, that kind of stuff. Those are 4 big things, as well as sometimes used or thrifted furniture. And it is kind of fun, when you have these models of people who are showing the same stuff. It's kind of cool to see everybody's version. I saw somebody whose water bottle is dented to all hell, and then you have somebody else who has a Stanley. Okay, we're gonna end it there. Here's your assignment. Here's your homework for the comments. Please, you are gonna make my day if you do this. So I would love for you to do this. I would like you to let me know the oldest thing you own in the comments. And also, I guess number 2, what are some underconsumption things that you do? Because I think this could make a fun video where I talk about different ways that you underconsume, or different ways that my community underconsumes. I think that could be fun. Okay. I'm gonna go. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed watching underconsumption TikToks. I loved having you here. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch my video. I so appreciate having you here. If you like this video, please give it a like, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, and I hope to catch you again around here soon. Bye.